You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet?
All right, Pithy listeners, welcome back. I hate to tell you this, Caroline, but this week's a total Debbie Downer.
I feel like that is an inevitability in some cases.
Mm-hmm.
Erica and I have been trying to pair our episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I did Rani Lakshmibai last week as an Indian heroine. And this week we're doing another amazing, remarkable person.
Noor Inayat Khan.
Oh good, I can't wait to say that.
Yeah, so exciting.
But it's a hard country to try to be a female heroine in.
Well, she was an Indian princess, but she was not from India.
Ooh, I can't wait for this Debbie Downer episode.
Noor Inayat Khan is a World War II heroine, and I want to warn everyone up front that it is a freaking tearjerker of an episode, and it is graphic in some places. We have an Indian princess who lays down her life as a British intelligence officer, even though a tenet of her religion is pacifism. So I want to ask you to ponder up front, what was she fighting for?
I love that.
Noor Khan was the eldest child of American poet Pirani Amina Begum, and I apologize if I didn't get that quite right. Her birth name is Aura Ray Baker, and we know that she changed her name whenever she got married, and she started wearing saris and was very involved in this cultural transition, which would probably not be accepted at all today, which is very interesting.
I guess it could be seen instead of taking on I'm assuming, husband's culture, to be just cultural appropriation.
Exactly.
That's a fine line, but I think it's lovely that she's embracing her spouse's culture.
Yeah, I do too. And she did marry a very famous Sufi teacher and musician, Inayat Khan. And
sorry, you said Inayat, which I now see is his wonderful name, but I heard in a yacht, and I was like, done!
No, can confirm that while they were probably a little more well-off than your standard person, not in a yacht.
Darn it. Yachts are lovely, but what is Sufi? It's Sufism?
Okay, so
Sufism?
Sufism is very hard to describe.
Oh, good. Thank God we do podcasts.
Yeah, I know. It is a mystic sect of Islam, which I did not know that they had mystics, but here we are. According to Shah, who is a Sufi teacher now, Sufism has two main technical objectives. One, to show the man himself as he really is, and two, to help him develop his real inner self, his permanent part. So I assume that's like a soul or like the essence of his being.
Before we continue, I have a question.
Yes.
Is the man himself referring to the fact that only men can do this? Or is it just referring to any gender? Okay, good.
Any gender, yeah.
Lovely.
Because she practices Sufism. It would be
I assumed, but I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, there was also a really neat allegory about how it's hard to describe a whole elephant when you have only felt the trunk. So...
Okay, valid.
Well, that's how they've described this, depending on the quote part of the elephant or the part of the religion you're experiencing. It's hard to tell what the whole is.
Okay.
That's Sufism as much as I can describe it.
In essence, it's a mystic version of Islam that takes what the Quran says a step further with
one's comprehension of oneself. And like I said earlier, one of the main tenets of this is to keep peace. Peace within yourself and peace with other people.
Thus the pacifist.
Right.
Got it.
So, let's get back to Noor. She was born in Moscow in 1914.
Oh my God, this woman is so... She's got Indian background, American background, born in Russia, gonna be a spy for the Brits.
They didn't stay long in Moscow. They moved shortly afterwards with the family to Bloomsbury. And she spent the next few years living at 4 Taviton Street, which will come up in a bit. And she's only a few minutes walk from Gordon Square, where she and her brother would look for fairies in the garden. How picturesque and English is that?
That's such an English childhood. That's lovely.
I love it, and I love it for her.
Looking for the fairies.
The Khans then moved to Paris after the First World War.
Another country.
You're having too much fun. So, they moved to Paris after the First World War, and Inayat, the dad, died while on pilgrimage in India.
Oh.
Yeah. Noor's mom was overwhelmed by grief, and Noor, at just 13, was left to look over the family. And some of the references that I found said that this was to when Pirani went back to her American name or array and stopped wearing sari out of grief and mourning for her
Okay, because that was part of like the bright and the happiness of her life, and so she went into mourning.
Sure.
So you said she's a princess at the beginning.
Yep.
And that he is a Sufism teacher.
Mm-hmm.
So he was an Indian prince who married just a traditional American woman.
Their last relative to sit on the throne was Tipu Sultan. He was also called the Tiger of Mysore, and
Nice.
he was the pioneer of rocket artillery.
Okay.
Yeah. And so
That's a catch.
he reigned.
Rocket scientist prince.
Yeah, he reigned from 1782 to 1799 when the Brits came in and
As they do.
removed him from power.
But there was family wealth, I'm assuming.
Yes, there was. And so I think he was involved 3 Anglo-Mysore wars.
Holy cow.
I want to do an episode on him because he was just so fascinating. But she was, yes, a pacifist and royalty who had kind of been displaced, but also had this incredible fighting spirit. You just don't have an ancestor like that and not have it influence you in some way.
You don't have the tiger in your background.
Right.
And not at least have a
Bite?
roar,
Roar?
hiss. I think they hiss.
Do they hiss?
I don't know. Tigers are the only ones that actually like go after humans for food. So tigers
Really?
are rough.
I didn't know that.
Tigers want to eat humans. They are very aggressive compared to like lions or something that really just want us to leave them alone.
I did not know that.
But tigers also live in much closer contact with humans because India is so populated, and that's where tigers live.
Noor has this really big burden now with a grieving mom and 2 younger brothers. She managed the house. She wrote short stories, dedicated poems to the family, and enrolled at École Normale de Musique in Paris, where she studied under Nadia Boulanger, harp and piano and composition, and she also studied child psychology at the Sorbonne.
Okay.
Just casually.
She's just a little impressive.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
not
like she
intimidating
was-
at all.
After finishing school, Khan produced an English translation of the Jataka tales, fables about the previous incarnations of the Buddha, and she establishes herself as a writer. Her book, 20 Jataka Tales, was published in 1939, and she would frequently contribute short stories and guest appearances on French radio during her time in France.
That is so cool that she is taking her Indian heritage and trying to introduce it within her predominantly, I assume, French culture based on her upbringing.
It's so important to be an ambassador of where you come from, good, bad, or ill.
I love that.
However,
Oh, our favorite word.
World War II was looming, and despite her pacifist beliefs, which were, of course, dictated by Sufism, she decided to join the WAF, the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and train to become a radio operator in 1940.
And being a radio operator, as we talked a little bit about in the Bletchley Park episode, was very dangerous.
Yes.
Very
And
dangerous.
we'll talk about that in a minute.
I mean, that's just heroic.
It is. It is so heroic. And so this is an excerpt from Spy Princess, which is her biography, written by Shrabani.
Her biography.
Quote, to Noor, the ideology of the Nazis and their pogrom against the Jews was fundamentally repulsive and opposed to all the principles of religious harmony that she had been brought up by with her father.
Nice.
This is one tenet of probably what she's fighting for. It's just absolutely against everything she believes when it comes to religious
Good.
harmony.
It should be. It's just a human...
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
Being a good human. But yes.
She, of course, from living in France, was able to speak French. She was quickly chosen to go to Paris and join the Special Operations Executive, or the SOE, a secret British organization set up to support the resistance to the Germans from behind the enemy lines through espionage and sabotage. So she was on the ground making things happen.
And this organization, as I understand it, was so secret that if a pilot was downed and then they helped him return home, the pilot could never fly another mission because the pilot could not be allowed to be caught and tortured for all of this information. It was so secret and very well established despite its danger. They were found out frequently.
Yeah.
But it was a very established network, and it was so important.
Khan was the first female radio operator to be sent by Britain into occupied France, according to her biographer, Shabrani Basu. Khan had worked hard to overcome her fear of weapons during combat training and improved her ability to translate Morse code, but colleagues in her intelligence network still had doubts.
Oh, probably because she was a woman?
I don't know. No, even though they hadn't sent a woman, they were still using women.
I would say that sending a pacifist might be a little worrisome.
Sure. So,
but
some
she's
wonder,
not. If the time comes, would she pull the trigger, I guess?
Yeah, and they had questions to, is she too young, too inexperienced? They pointed out that she had carelessly left codes lying around and that she had unthinkingly revealed her British background by pouring milk into cups before tea.
Oh, table manners are one of the biggest giveaways. A lot of American and British spies that went over to Germany and pretended to be German gave themselves away by using the fork in the wrong way.
Oh, and how they held up the number 3.
They held up the number 3. Yeah, exactly. So it was a tell. But it is not a great sign.
No. This is what was written on some of the reports that were discussing her eligibility. Not overburdened with brains, but has worked hard and shown keenness apart from some dislike of the security side of the course, unquote. And that's Superior Officer Colonel Frank Spooner. That's followed up by, quote, she has an unstable and temperamental personality, and it is very doubtful whether she is suited to work in the field. Which Maurice Buckmaster, who is a section chief, retorted nonsense in the margins, which I think is like,
okay,
the devil's in the details with so much of history, and like that's telling.
It's literally in the margins.
Yeah.
It sounds to me like there were 2 very different opinions about the capability of this woman.
Well,
and
Officer Vera Atkins, who I think was one of her runners and oversaw SOE recruitment, was convinced of her ability. She was the one who actually had worked with Noor about how do you want to let your mother know if you're killed or captured.
Oh,
yeah.
That's a deep conversation. Jeez.
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, any good news was supposed to be given as much as the SOE was going to give. But if she was captured, she was not to let her mother know until she had already been killed.
I understand that, yeah. I do. I can see that would be easier for the mother.
Yeah. But also, can we talk about this woman who is an author, who is a musician, who studied child psychology at the Sorbonne, is not, quote, overburdened by brains? Like, that's such crap.
Again, I think there was a lot of male ego of women can't do this. We have always done this. Why are we doing this? And she was young. I've seen pictures of her. She looked younger than she was.
Mm-hmm. They really aged her up when she took on her undercover persona as Madeline.
Interesting.
In the hours of June 17th, 1943, Noor became the first woman agent to be parachuted behind enemy lines in France. Previously, women had been sent as couriers, but not as radio operators. So her task was to maintain radio contact between Britain and the resistance in Paris. And this was, like we've been saying, a hugely dangerous job.
The Nazis were tracking the radio signals. They were actively every night looking for these resistance workers.
Mm-hmm. And the radio equipment was incredibly bulky and hard to conceal, and she would stay on the air for more than 20 minutes at a time, and at this point in the summer of 43, the average lifespan of an agent in the field was just 6 weeks. And that's the longest I saw. I saw 2 weeks and I saw 3 weeks.
Average. Oh my god.
Mm-hmm. You knew if you were going in there, you had about 6 weeks.
Oh! So she volunteered for a suicide mission.
Mm-hmm.
And she knew this.
Essentially.
Okay.
I mean, there's no,
Everybody hopes they're the one that doesn't, but...
Khan was sent to France under the code name Madeline, the first woman wireless operator to be deployed to that country by the UK, and she landed in the city of Le Mans. Noor traveled to Paris, where she would work with the resistance network called Prosper. Now, within days of her getting there, the woman probably doesn't have a consistent place to sleep, and all of the high-ranking Prosper agents were captured by Nazis.
Oh!
Their wireless sets were seized, leaving Noor as the only operator in the field for the next few months.
I would assume that Prosper was supposed to help her get set up, find her a place to live, and show her the tricks of the trade.
The ropes.
Not an auspicious start.
Not an auspicious start. But the Gestapo knew about her.
Madeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they could even hear her transmissions, but they couldn't catch her. So Noor took her wireless set with her everywhere. She changed places to transmit. She was disguised. Like we said, it weighed about 20 pounds, so she'd carry around a suitcase or a briefcase to kind of disguise what she was doing.
I mean, yeah.
Now, she had several narrow escapes, and I've got a couple of first-hand accounts. Okay.
Goody.
One day on the metro, she was stopped and questioned by 2 German officers. She kept cool, not flushed or anything, and told the Germans, quote, "Can't you see this is a cinematographic apparatus? Look at all the light bulbs," unquote. And the 2 Germans, totally ignorant of what cinematographic apparatus looked like, and were too embarrassed to admit it. And they just let her go because they were ignorant. On another occasion, she was hanging out her aerial on a branch outside of her room when she certainly
aerial? Is that like a satellite dish?
I assume it's like an antenna.
An antenna type thing? Okay.
Yeah, sure. So she certainly heard a voice calling out to her, and it says, "Can I help you, mademoiselle?" And so she turned, and she was face to face with a German officer who lived in the same freaking apartments as she did. Her neighbor's just trying to be neighborly. "Hey, can I help you, ma'am?" And so she just whipped out her charm and pretended she wanted to listen to the wireless. Now, that was banned, but he was like, "You know what?
You're a pretty girl.
We just all want to get on the wireless."
We all want some info.
Yeah, and so he ended up helping her put out the aerial, not realizing that he had aided a British agent, and half an hour later she was transmitting to London.
That's the best story.
Yeah.
Thanks to that German dude.
This next source, I just want to highlight, it's from The Guardian, but this is a little bit of a roundabout how this man got the information, so I just want to explain that right quick.
Okay.
So Arthur Megida, who is the person being interviewed, told The Guardian that he acquired an account by Pierre Vianot, a fellow resistance fighter, written as a private memoir for his family, and it tells about Madeline, or Noor Khan. Quote, "It's never been used or published. I learned from it that in the autumn of 1943, with the Gestapo closing in on her, they do everything they can to save her." So this is Britain. "They take her to a hair salon, get her a whole new wardrobe, except that everything she's chosen is blue, just like before. And the Gestapo knows that Noor's really fond of blue, and that was a key factor that give her away.
Pick a new color." I also wonder, and I don't want to make this too important, but I would assume that she had a darker complexion and would therefore have been noticeable as a half Indian woman, because I've seen pictures of her and she does not look French.
Well, they actually made her bleach her hair too to kind of help in this.
Well, that would do it.
Yes, they had an idea of what she looked like physically, but the blue was the radar that they really picked up on because, and we'll put this in the show notes, but the side-by-side of her as Madeline and herself, they do look extremely different.
That is so
shocking.
Cool.
He further wrote in his memoir that after working with Khan for some weeks, she was so exhausted that she could barely sit up when they went to a cafe, and he suggested that they go to a hotel, taking her by the arm, quote, "like lovers," he recalled. "We asked for a room," and he added, "Behind the locked door, she collapses on the bed while I sit in a chair reading. 2 hours later, she wakes up, splashes water on her face, and we get ready to get on with our work." Khan suggested that he, quote, "mess up the bed to make it seem real," unquote.
Clever. Yeah, that would be telling. Oh my gosh. 2 hours to reinvigorate myself to be sought after by the Gestapo.
Yeah.
That's all I need in a night.
Around the middle of October, she was still safe and would have managed to catch a flight out of France if she had not been betrayed by someone in her circle.
Wow.
Noor's address was sold to the Nazis for 100,000 francs, and the person who betrayed her was Renee Gary, the sister of Noor's circuit leader, Henri Gary.
Renee?
Yeah.
Did she turn in her own brother too?
I don't know. That doesn't make
hell?
it just doesn't make much sense.
That is
can you just
Renee.
not? Can you just not?
Oh, this is such a hard thing because a lot of the people living in France were destitute. There was no food. They had nothing. And so 100,000 francs would have, but, yeah.
It's hard not to judge. I recognize I probably shouldn't, but I'm judging. Sorry.
That's a great way to say it. You've never been in that position. You don't know how you would act.
I hope I
wouldn't do that. My hope for myself is that I would not be tempted in such a way. But Renee was.
Hunger.
You will do quite a bit to ensure that you survive.
So they pick her up. Noor was now a prisoner and labeled highly dangerous, and the orders to transfer her came directly from Berlin, and she became the first woman agent to be sent to a German prison.
Oof.
She was sent to Pforzheim prison on the edge of the Black Forest, and she was there for 10 months.
So longer than she'd been in the field.
Oh, yeah. Like 3 times.
Yeah.
She was classified as Nacht und Nebel, basically make them disappear. Night and shadow.
Ooh.
And this is where it gets really dark, and listen at your own comfort level. It's not great from here on out.
Oh no.
Noor was shackled in chains and foot irons. She was kept in isolation, and she had her food delivered when no one was in the corridor, so there was no interaction possible. There were no facilities for her to feed or clean herself. She was regularly beaten, tortured, and interrogated, but she revealed nothing about her circuit and gave no names.
That's incredible. It is rare that anyone can stand up to true torture. And frankly, just the bathroom situation counts as torture. Everything else is just beyond.
Now, despite the desolation, she allegedly kept her spirits up and by thinking about her father and how he would soothe her when she was feeling sad when she was a kid. She remembered how he would tell her that she had the blood of Tipu Sultan flowing in her veins.
Tigress. And
she would scratch messages on her food bowl and actually established contact with fellow female prisoners in other cells.
Stop it.
Yeah, and the messages went back and forth, and she wrote Vive la France, and the girls wrote back to her with encouraging words, and they could hear the RAF planes overhead. And Noor was desperate, of course, for news for the progress of the war. At night, though, they could hear her crying in her cell and heard her being slapped and interrogated. So it was a very bittersweet, at least they had some communication with someone else.
But at the same time, to hear what was happening to that friend or connection.
Yeah. On the night of September 11th, Noor was ordered to come out of her cell. "I'm leaving" were the final words she managed to scratch on her bowl to her friends, and she was driven, handcuffed to another prison in Karlsruhe and met 3 of her colleagues there. So these are people she had been in the circuit with. No, it's not. Together, the girls were driven to the railway station where they caught trains to Munich. They were told they were going to work as agricultural laborers. And none of them realized that their escorting officer, Max Fossmer, was carrying their execution papers with him.
I mean, if you have been in isolation for 10 months, being tortured and beaten and probably half-starved, do you really think they're gonna let you go to be an agricultural worker where you could escape and use all that training?
Do you think if you're malnourished and beaten half to death that
properly?
your brain is gonna work?
Fair enough.
Yeah. They reached Dachau at midnight and
Never a good sign.
Never a good sign. Walked with their suitcases to the concentration camp, and they saw searchlights combing the camp and the huts where the prisoners were packed like cattle. It was going to be a long last night for Noor.
Ugh.
Maybe because she was labeled highly dangerous, and maybe because she was dark-skinned, she was singled out for more torture. All night long, she was kicked and beaten, and when her frail body had slumped on the floor, she was asked to kneel and shot point blank in the back of the head by an SS guard, Wilhelm Rupert. Her last words were, "Liberty."
Liberté.
Immediately afterwards, her body was thrown into the blazing crematorium. Eyewitnesses saw smoke billowing out of the chimneys. Back in England, both her mother and her brother reported that they had the same dream, that Noor came to them surrounded by blue light and told them that she was free.
Oh, at that exact moment?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And in blue, too. I like that even in death, she keeps her signature color.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta have a standard.
Yeah.
Wow.
That is obviously the end of her life, but there is so much more. Sorry, did you need me to stop?
No, well, I was thinking, and I don't know if I want to put this in. There's execution orders for these women, and for Noor specifically. But they still had to beat her first.
Of course, why not? They're just
like
hateful.
One final moment of torture. It makes you wonder. We're not going to get into the psychology of the SS because I just can't. But
it's just brutal.
To have so little value, not only for human life, but human pain, suffering.
Right.
And to enjoy it that sadistically and to seek out extra. Like, it wasn't required.
This isn't just someone following orders. This is someone who is taking pleasure in the destruction.
I mean, I'm sure he was told to kill her, but I don't think he was told it better be bloody.
Right.
But he just did.
Yeah. So.
You know what?
No one likes the Nazis. They're terrible.
I mean, no one likes the Nazis. That's very true. But I'm just saying, the brutality of the SS, in very specifically, is unreal. It's mind-boggling. Mm-hmm. You just don't get it.
To be honest, for that specific reason, I tend to stay away from a lot of World War II. Just because I remember Night by Elie Wiesel. I couldn't get through it.
But if we don't talk about it, and the reason that we do this, we've discussed over and over again, history repeats itself. So we need to make sure that we drill it in so that this could never happen again. And it has happened again. We have had mass exterminations and terrible genocides. But the more we talk about it, the more we make it clear that humanity has to do better.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry, that got so dark.
So dark. So let's just talk about her influence, which is a little bit brighter.
Let's do it!
That's a little bit brighter. On January 16th, 1946, the French awarded her the Croix de Guerre, the highest civilian honor, and 3 years later, in 1949, England awarded her the George Cross,
which is the highest award bestowed by the British government for non-operational gallantry, or gallantry not in the presence of the enemy. And I'm gonna say she was in the presence of the enemy.
Yeah.
So I think they gypped her. Just a thought.
I do too.
It's like they're like, well, she was very gallant, but there were no enemies around. Except for the ones chasing her every night.
Or, I don't know, the one that shot her executioner style?
Oh my god.
Anyway. In France, Noor is remembered as Madeleine or Madeline, a heroine of the resistance. There is a plaque outside of her family home, and a band plays outside her house every year on Bastille Day.
I love that.
In addition to the band, there is a leafy square that has been named Coeur Madeleine after her. The mayor of Paris has described her as a modern-day Joan of Arc. Yeah.
I think they had very different roles.
I think they have very different styles. But,
very different goals.
But it is believed that her transmissions were some of the most integral in the D-Day landing.
I'm not saying what she did wasn't important. I'm just saying they had very different...
Well, also, she wasn't being spoken to by God.
That's a big difference. Well, and she wasn't trying to reinstate a
that
king.
too. That's not the point.
Not the point.
Don't take it away from her, man. She's an icon.
I mean, the D-Day landings were essential in the turn of the war.
Yes.
And if that's the case, if what she did made those possible, She saved so many lives.
The niece of Charles de Gaulle also paid tribute to her at a memorial and eulogized her this way. Nothing, neither her nationality nor the tradition of her family, none of these obliged her to take her position in the war, however she chose it. It is our fight that she chose, that she pursued with an admirable and invincible courage.
Because she didn't have to do this.
Yeah.
No one had to be an operator behind enemy lines. That is never something that you are enlisted or forced to do. It is a volunteer only.
Right.
Like submarines, volunteer only. But to do so anyway and to be like, I speak French, I speak English, I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm willing to accept a 6-week timeline. Oh my God.
Yeah. According to Spy Princess, Noor's interrogator in Paris, Ernst Vogt, told Jean Overton Fuller, a friend and author of Khan's 1952 biography, Madeline, how he had never come across someone like her and, quote, admired her courage, bravery, and kindness, unquote.
You know what? Oh, sorry.
Wait.
Big middle finger.
Wait till this. Quote, Vogt once asked her whether she had wasted her life by joining the service and that her sacrifice was in vain, and she replied, it did not matter. She had served her country, and that was recompense.
Also, she assisted with the D-Day landings. Me.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm flipping off the script.
You
You don't get to praise her valor from, no. I think it's just him
agree.
trying to be like, no, I swear, I didn't really believe in this, and she was a good person.
Yeah. It's backtracking.
Yeah. Whatever you do in your life, you have to own it.
Because
And you, Ernst Vogt, interrogated and ruined this woman's very
young
and
Promising.
promising life. Thank you for coming up with the words I could not. Young and promising life.
That's what I'm here for.
Can't admire her courage, bravery, and kindness. Jesus. Sorry, I'm angry.
Shrabani is who I want to close with because a lot of today's information came from her book, Spy Princess. So she notes that it was important to realize that the war would not have been won by the Allies without the likes of Noor and millions from the British colonies, a fact which is too often ignored. Experts say the contribution of people of Asian descent and people of color to the nation building has hardly been acknowledged at a time when ethnic minorities feel increasingly marginalized under a right-wing government. Quote, the understanding in the West is that Britain won this war on its own, that Churchill won it for them. They need to know there were 2.5 million people of the Indian subcontinent who came forward to volunteer for this war.
And as we learned last week, it's not like the Brits had treated them well. I think people were willing to fight and nations were willing to join because of the Nazi awfulness.
Yeah. Yes, there was a lot of nationalism involved, but there was so much more going on. It was much more about humanity and the human condition and what will happen if you don't stand up for what's right.
And it's hard to think, what can I personally, as one woman, do to make a difference? And you just look at Noor.
Yeah.
She knew what she was getting into. I think that's pretty clear. And she thought, I can make a difference. And people belittled her. Even her own training officers were unsure that she could even make a dent. And this woman, she personally, if you track it all the way back, changed the history of the war. One woman.
20-something.
120-something woman. So you can't discount the one. And when you think, why would I bother to stand up for something when everyone else is doing it? Because one person
Makes a difference.
is all it takes.
And so now I ask you, Caroline, what was she fighting for?
Oh, I think this has so many, this is like an onion. We gotta peel back the layers because she was fighting for so many different things. So I think she was fighting for England because she had spent a happy, idyllic childhood there. She was fighting for France, a country that had educated her and that had been part of her formative upbringing, and she saw it being ravaged by the Nazis. I think she was fighting for her father in some ways, because I think she thought, what would my father do? It sounded like he was a man of very high personal expectations and that he had a very strong moral compass. And she probably felt that if he had still been alive, he would have done something. So I can see her desire, it's like a Mulan moment, to do something in the stead of a father who can't. I think she could have been fighting as well for her pacifist beliefs. Fighting for pacifism seems so strange.
So I think you can sum up everything she was fighting for in one word.
Justice.
Nah, she said it. It was her last dying word.
Liberty.
Liberty. And I think that encompasses it all.
British liberty, French liberty,
Humanity.
humanity's
Liberty
liberty.
for humanity. And I think, too, at that point when she knew that her life on this earth was done, she was also fighting for her liberty. I think she met death in a very courageous way.
Oh my God, yes.
I think that you can't discount the one. She was a musician, children's author, and child psychologist. It wasn't like she...
Beyond the dual language, there was nothing else
Right.
that she had trained previously for. She saw the one thing she could do.
Even if you only have one thing, and you can adapt whatever else you have in your toolbox to accomplish a goal.
And pacifism is a belief that any violence, including war, is unjustifiable in any circumstance. That doesn't mean you can't be an activist. There's nothing that says that even if you're a pacifist, you have to just sit back and watch.
Well,
and
no,
so she found a way.
Pacifism is actually very active. I think that she saw that if she sat by and did nothing, there would be no harmony and no peace for humanity.
And no liberty.
And no liberty. And that was integral to who she was.
That was worth dying.
And that, my friends, is that.
I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica, and we are pithily yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!